Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our quick publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Welcome to another episode of Scouser Tommies on Anfield Index. I'm Jim Boardman and I'm with Jay Reid, and we're going to have a look back at what's happened in the last week or so with Liverpool Football Club and what's been happening from the point of view of being in the city of Liverpool, and maybe a little bit look back further as well, because we basically finally got to the end of part one of this weirdly interrupted season. We've got something or other called a World Cup taking place in Qatar, which still isn't getting much of my attention. That interruption, of course, means that the proper football's interrupted, but there's still a lot going on. As we said last week, there's always stuff going on in this city and with this club, so let's try and go through it. I mean, I don't know where to start. Have you had a good week? Have you had a good week since the last game, since we were last on, AJ?
I've had a long week. We were just saying before we started, as we record, it's Friday afternoon, and Saturday, gone 6 days ago, feels like an absolute age, because it kind of fell into the usual sort of situation of, Liverpool play every 3 days, and that's how you work your life out, because Liverpool are playing 1 or 2 days from now, or Liverpool played 1 or 2 days ago, and the next one is coming up literally around the corner. And as we now look at it, our next game is the 22nd of December in the energy drink, monkey, Carabao, whatever milk league, beer competition you want to call it these days. I don't know.
Have you ever actually had any Carabao? Ever? I think I've even seen it.
No, I've seen it in shops. It's like the poor cousin of Red Bull. Like, it kind of looks like the Aldi version.
I was going to say the Aldi, yeah.
If that was a nice way of putting it. People who would understand that obviously is Aldi is a cheap brand supermarket, and that's a rip-off, is usually found on their shelves. Yeah. Just to the same, pretty much same quality, but no, I can't confess to ever having one, but it was kind of laughable. I thought that the authorities deemed that our game against City would be the last one of that week on Thursday, because the World Cup finishes on the Sunday, and give maximum opportunity for City's horde of players who potentially could be playing in the latter stages of the competition to make sure they're back and give them the best opportunity for a full strength team. Because why would you give Liverpool an advantage of playing earlier on in the week when we've got less representation?
Yeah, I mean, why would City get the preference? But that's maybe something for another podcast, and we've got to be careful what accusations you make. But for lots of reasons, City can buy the way into more success, if you like, than a lot of other clubs, and maybe we'll come on to that. But that's clearly why I think FSG are looking to sell now, because financial fair play is just a myth. It doesn't happen. It's not a real thing. Never probably was. Any chance of it, the better lawyers won, which is usually the case, isn't it, with money? The more money you've got, the better lawyers you get, the more you can push people with less money out of the way and things. So that's what happened. City won the FFP battle, which that's what it feels like anyway to fans, and it's a shame it's like that. But I suppose let's go back a week then. Let's go back to that game, the last game of this half of the season. And I know before we went into it, we were talking about how important it was for us to win, because we'd had such a shaky start to the season in every way. I mean, we even started the Champions League off on a really bad foot, but I feel ended the group stages in a good foot. And then with the season itself, it's been so up and down, but we are still in that fizzy drink cup. We are still not so much in contention for the title, definitely not, but we're in contention for the Champions League places. And of course, Champions League itself, we're in that in the new year. So it was just important to get that first win, or that last win, if you like, under the belt, and go into that break, this stupid enforced break now, not thinking about a defeat and all the ramifications of that. We've got weeks now where we can just sort of look forward rather than back.
Yeah, it's as you say at the beginning, it was, well, we've said for weeks, it's a weird season. It's unprecedented in terms of having a major international tournament wedged in, so close to Christmas as well, which we touched on last week. But it does feel a little bit relieved that we've got to this point. It's not where we'd want to be. Obviously, we all rolled into the season coming off the Community Shield, with high hopes. We put City to bed. We thought, Darwin Núñez was going to outscore Erling Haaland. Erling Haaland was a flop, and the league was going to be wrapped up by Christmas. But little did we know what was actually going to transpire, and we've sort of bumbled our way through. But I think in the last 4, 5, 6 games, we've seen a lot more positive signs. A bit more sort of structure in terms of positional play. And it's too easy to say we just went back to basics, but we literally did. In terms of, you keep the back door shut to your best of your ability, and the quality we've got up the top end of the pitch should always see you through the games. And it has done. We've slowly started to climb the table. Ideally, we'd like to be, 2 or 3, 4 spots higher, but we are where we are. And I think looking forward, the positives to take are key players like Luis Diaz, Diogo Jota. We've missed them the last 5 weeks or something like that. They're massive for us. Ibu Konate's only just come back, played a handful of games, and it's fairly evident that he's a different class for me to Matip and Gomez in terms of his defensive work. And hopefully, we know where the problem is in the centre of the field. It's well documented, it's highlighted, and the amount of media coverage it's getting, you would like to hope there's a little bit of substance to the fact that we may actually delve into the market in January or prior to January in terms of agreeing a deal and getting it tied up, much like the Van Dijk one, where basically it was just before Christmas we all got that present of, or maybe between Christmas and New Year, I can't quite remember exactly, but Van Dijk was stood with his Liverpool shirt in front of his Christmas tree. We were like, well, there we go. If we could have that with a midfielder, we could all throw names out there who we like, who we want. But, a competent, fit, athletic midfielder, that would be a lovely Christmas present and a healthy boost in terms of going into the second half of the season. Added to that, lads coming back from injury, and those who've gone to the World Cup hopefully coming back with a full bill of health as well.
Yeah, and I think there's nothing to suggest that even though FSG are interested in bringing new shareholders in or selling the club, depending on which extreme you want to go with, there's nothing to suggest that they're going to change how they're running the club for the time being. And the way they run the club, and they've had a lot of detractors, is that when they can make money available from within the club, they make money available from within the club, and there's loads of potential for Liverpool to make money from within the club. Okay, it's difficult to compete with people who are bankrolled by nations that are rich off the price of oil, which at the minute, like all sort of energy costs, is off the scale, and there's all kinds of profits being made by people who work in that industry or are involved in that industry. So it's a hard thing for Liverpool to compete with. But even so, we do go along and find these players, like we found Van Dijk, like we found Diaz, like we found Salah back in the day. It feels like a long time ago now, but we've gone and found these players and found the money we've needed for them. The difficulty, of course, is that the money you need seems to be going up and up and up, even quicker than energy bills. Although the government are probably trying to do all they can to make sure that's not always the case, make sure they keep going up nice and fast. But it's been, I think we've had a decent time with FSG. Whether we get more off another owner or not is another matter. But we've got, in my view, we've always had sort of transfer windows where if we've really needed something, we've got it. And it's always got to have been the right one. And that's one thing. I know sometimes FSG are criticised and the sort of people aren't happy and thinking they're being overcautious. But I think there's a real reluctance from Liverpool to spend 60 million quid on someone who might not be what you want. And The closest we've had to that is maybe with Darwin, and just at the beginning of the season, where people were beginning to wonder, is this the first time we've messed up? But I'm not sure how many people were really thinking that when they really sat and thought about it and remembered, you've got to give him time and all the rest of it. And he's showing now he was a good signing. Obviously, you can imagine if it was another club, they would have spent 50% more maybe on a similar kind of signing. So that's what we're up against. But yeah, in my view, all signs are that we're going to try and spend in this window if we can, if there's the right thing there. And there's no reason why we shouldn't. This club generates so much money. There's so much comes through the turnstiles every weekend. There's so much going through the tills, not just at the club, but around the world in the deals they've done with Nike. The way that Liverpool gets so much of a cut of the money that comes from that deal. It's a brand, they literally went through litigation with New Balance to make sure they could get this deal with Nike, because it offered so much more in terms of what came in from actually selling the shirts around the world and how many places it could be sold in. So there's no reason we haven't got the money. So I'm again, like yourself, fingers crossed that this Christmas we'll have one of those pictures of someone that we really need. Maybe as we go through the World Cup, we can have a look and think about where do we really need players, because if we're greedy, you can probably think of like quite a few places where we'd like improvements. But I think one thing that's key as well, what you've just said as well, is that so far this season we've had so many players missing. And I was talking to someone yesterday about the season so far, and one thing that jumped out at me is the amount of times I've done podcasts, either raw or this, or just talked in general about the game on anything, and about Liverpool's last match or wherever. Did you talk about the starting lineup and what you thought of it? Well, every time you look at a starting lineup, you look at the bench and you think, well, that's pretty much the only starting lineup we could do. Maybe one or two players on the bench that maybe could have come in. But on the whole, this season, it feels like every single game we've picked the 11 fit players, and that's about all we could do. And I don't know whether that's a worry because it means that there's a bigger problem, or whether that's something we can think, well, that was just a bad spell. Every club has them. I don't know. Were we unlucky to have all those injuries? Can we hope that that's now behind us?
I think on the whole, we've probably had a rough ride in terms of injuries, because when we tend to get them, we get them all in one area. Right? We all know the central defensive problem. Left wing, Jota and Diaz, they are probably starters for every other team in the league. Or if not a starter, they would be very close to who they currently start on the left-hand side. But I can't think of anyone better, like Jack Grealish, or he's not better than Diaz or Jota. Maybe an argument for Phil Foden, but nobody else really would stand out. Maybe Martinelli at Arsenal, but it's give and take. I'd still have Luis Diaz personally, but
yeah,
midfield, we all know, we've all banged on about it, but we're light in there in terms of availability of numbers and availability of full fitness. In terms of what we got in there, like relying on James Milner, and we've mentioned it before, that to his credit, he goes out there and he gives all he's got, and sometimes all he's got just isn't to the standard we require. It's not his fault. He's 36 years of age, and he's being asked to play for us. Like, if the ideal situation presents itself, he'd be, maybe down the leagues playing, League One, Championship football, on a regular basis, where it's a bit more slow, a bit more rough and ready, where he can probably get away with his rough and tumble a bit more. It just seems to be an unfortunate case that it all happens at once. But every team gets injuries, and I think what doesn't help is we're allowed 5 subs now, and the benches have got 9 players on the bench, and You go back further than I do, but I'm used to the days of when it was 5 and you allowed 3 subs, and it goes back further to when there probably wasn't really any subs, or he was one man and that was your sub, and if he was a centre forward or he was a centre half, that was just the guy you had there. And
they only came on for injuries as well. Usually they come on just for injuries.
It just looks a bit worse, I think, now. 9 subs, and unless you are highly fortunate in the injury category and highly wealthy enough to have international stars lining your bench and probably a couple in the stands plus the 11 lads on the field, you are going to have a couple of lads sat there, or in our case, which really baffles me is having 2 keepers on the bench all the time. Like, put a youngster on there. There's plenty of young talent in our academy. Surely we don't need Kelleher and Adrian sat on the bench. Like, you know, I just feel it's a bit of a waste of space. Give some lad the opportunity, but it can then look obviously a little bit like lightweight or a little bit sort of suspect in terms of, well, we haven't got nothing else, and that's what it is. So I think, you know, it's a combination of the current rule system and the injuries that we have got. It doesn't reflect well, but you know, you can't moan really, because everybody gets injuries. It's, you know, how you deal with them. And
hello, I'm here to annoy you. I'm here to annoy you into listening to more of me and more of others on EPL Index. We don't just have the Anfield Index stuff. We've got EPL Index as well, which covers the entirety of the Premier League. And we have 3 podcasts and a whole bunch of really good writing on EPLindex.com. The podcasts are my own 2-footed podcast, which is every day at 4 p.m, Monday through Friday, covering the whole league. We have A Tad Predictable, hosted by Tadiwa. You know Tadiwa, he does Anfield Index. He presents A Tad Predictable before every Premier League match week. And then Kevin DeVries and his crew on the EPL Roundtable, they're every week after the Premier League match week. So make sure you listen to everything we're doing on EPL Index and follow us there on Twitter at EPL Index. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Sometimes others deal with them better because maybe they've got more finances to be able to afford to have 40, 50 million pound backups in every position, where the majority of clubs have just got to be savvy in terms of doing what they can, where they can. And if you're lightweight like we have been at right back, then that's just the situation you've got to deal with.
Yeah, and I think we've got to look at doing things like, I mean, if you listen to kind of all the supposed philosophies of FSG from when we first got them as owners, the idea was that they wouldn't want anyone who was over a certain age to be brought in, and they wouldn't want anyone over a certain age to get a new contract. They wanted to keep everyone young. And if you look at the age of the team now and the older players who are so good, you know, you're not going to let those go. You're going to keep those players. You're going to hang on to those players as long as you can. Eventually they'll be too old and eventually you'll let them go. But an example is bringing James Milner in, and for all the mixed feelings there are about that player, what he's done, and I know he costs money because his wages are higher because we didn't pay a transfer fee for him, but we brought a player in who brought loads of experience, who does, I'm sure, is a massive difference in the dressing room, which is something that quite often gets forgotten. He's a good player to have around, and maybe if we haven't got £50 million to spend on more. I mean, what did Jack Grealish cost to spend most of his life on the bench? We haven't got that kind of money for people to sit on the bench, but maybe we need to look at players who can come in and help out when there are injuries, who are going to be happy to be maybe not playing as much, but playing at a club like Liverpool when they do get to play. And that's something I think we really do need to look at, and maybe that means we're going to get players who are going to get a decent payday for what's left of the career, maybe not going to play that many games, but could actually be the difference between winning and losing a final, because you've had such a shortage of players. Because like the 9 players we had on the bench, as you say, for Southampton, as you say, 2 goalkeepers, which I also don't understand. I get it if you're on a tour somewhere and they're the only 9 players you've got left, you might as well stick one of the keepers on the bench. Or if it's like I'm not sure if in Champions League games you kind of get to put all of your squad on the bench. I can't remember. I know in that World Cup thing that we're trying to not talk about, I think your whole squad can be on the bench if they're not on the pitch. So that kind of thing, fair enough. But for this, I don't understand it. But then the biggest reminder of where we were and the troubles we had was that Nat Phillips came on towards the end, didn't he? And I was thinking, I'm not having a go at Nat because I think he did a good job for us in the circumstances. But, you know, that's where we're at in terms of backup. That we got to the point where Nat Phillips had to come in for a league game. And that's something... And I'm not having a go at him here because I know he's good enough to a certain extent, but you know, is that good enough for the future for us? And that's something that I think we need to look at in this window and future windows is how we get our backups ready, because as we saw in that COVID season and as we've seen to some extent this season, injuries happen, And there's nothing you can do, no matter how good you are, no matter how good your doctor is. There's times when you can't do anything about it. If your striker's going to get clattered by a big defender and, have a really dodgy injury, that's going to happen. If you're, even with being allowed to make 5 subs, there's still going to be a player who just runs that little bit too long, has that little 5 minutes too many on the pitch because someone else was in a worse state, and as a result pulls a hamstring or something. These things happen, so we've got to get better at it. But that game against Southampton, I think, I don't know, the injuries were still there. The fact that we had to bring him on.
Yeah, it's as you've said, it's not his fault. Much in the case of James Milner, like if Nat Phillips was good enough to be, a rotation option at centre back for us, then there would be clubs knocking on our door to say we'll take him off your hands.
Yeah, because
the calibre of team and level that we operate at. You would like to think that players, if they're in a rotation option or they're available in the squad to be picked every week, there'd be lesser clubs in terms of where they couldn't ply their trade, knocking on your door and saying, well, if you're not going to play him every week, we'll certainly take him.
Yeah.
And maybe we outpriced him out of a move, maybe he didn't want to move, maybe there wasn't suitors there available. There's arguments to be had on several occasions, but he shouldn't really be knocking around our team, and that could then again be, the transfer situation. Was he refusing to go with someone not willing to pay the price or whatever, or were we too hesitant in terms of being able to let him go and feel comfortable that we could bring someone else in, because we've seen the situation that transpired a few seasons ago, and is Klopp just being uber careful and thinking, well, I can't possibly go to that again. But on the flip side, you think, well, if you've got an asset there that you might only see 4 or 5 games a season across a 64, 65 game season or whatever, and 3 or 4 of them are maybe starting domestic cups and the odd sub appearance like we've seen last week, surely, again, to me, you cash in, you bring the money in, because that's the sort of model we operate on. And there must be a young boy in the academy who is willing to be in that position to step up and say, well, I can do that job. I'm only 18, 19 years of age, but give me a go. And, we should be able to look at them and say, yeah, he's got the potential to do that. Because sometimes it feels as though there's a huge chasm, even though all teams are now based in Kirkby at the facility, and this was the huge idea and the grand vision to have all teams there. So if there was somebody impressing, it was easily available to take them and throw them into the first team picture, and we've done that. We've seen youngsters across the years being cherry picked out of the younger teams and given opportunities, but I do feel also there's probably a handful of players on our academy books under 18, under 23 level, under 21, whatever it wants to be labelled at. And everybody knows who they are, and they're the ones with a little cross-paired name to say he might be good enough. But then it seems like the rest are just like, well, they're just there to play a little bit of football because, it's a handy situation to be in. And there never ever seems to be like, we've got a breakout star here, and he comes out of nowhere. And I think we must have a centre half in there, because we don't play with no centre halves in the lesser ages. So
yeah,
why can't we bring someone? I don't know. I don't know enough about the academy situation in terms of who is there, but that's just how I feel. If we're going to be shrewd with money, if there's an asset to sell who we aren't going to use, then cash in and look to bring one through, like your next up for the production line, because that's how it used to be. That's how, our heroes are made, like the likes of Trent Alexander-Arnold, the likes of Steven Gerrard, the likes of Robbie Fowler, like young boys, local lads, given the opportunity, and that in turn feeds the dream of thousands of kids, not only in Liverpool but around the world, that you will get an opportunity, but obviously to be a young Scouser and represent Liverpool, or to be unfortunate enough to represent Everton, it's a dream for people. So
yeah,
you've got to still dangle that carrot, I think.
Yeah, And I think, like, if you're looking at, like, so, like, the 14-year-old you gets a knock on the door kind of thing. There's a scout interested, and you're like, which club's he from? And it could be Liverpool, it could be Everton, it could be Tranmere. Like, no, then the 14-year-old you wouldn't have any interest in Everton or Tranmere if Liverpool were knocking. That's straight away because you're so passionate about the club and all the rest of it. But there's plenty of 14-year-olds or whatever age who might be, well, hang on a minute, which is going to be the best club in terms of me actually getting to be a professional footballer? But am I going to get a career with any of these clubs? And I think Liverpool maybe, they do bring youth players through from time to time, but are we the place where you would maybe send your kid if that was in front of you, that was the option, you know, had a few clubs to choose from, and you sort of put your passion and your loyalty and your heart, if you like, to one side and just use your head and think, where do I want to suggest my child goes to, you know, or where would I try and, what's my advice to my child on where to go, however you look at it, is Liverpool the place? And that thing, that the obvious thing to me as you're talking then is that, okay, centre-back is one of the hardest positions maybe to bring a young player in because it's such an important place. Like if you bring someone in up front, they miss a couple of sitters. It's not the end of the world because there'll probably be another chance created. And maybe even if they miss the sitter, someone will go and get the rebound and all the rest of it. So it's a totally different thing, maybe centre-back. But even so, as you just said, like there's two spaces on that bench for one goal, for a goalkeeper. You know, two places being taken by goalkeepers. Stick a young centre-back on that bench. And if the game goes right, and if we've got time to sort of say, just for the last 10 minutes even, stick them out, let them have a go. And that either proves to you that they're good enough for you and that you need to give them more time or, you know, work with them in more ways. Or maybe if they're not quite good enough for you, it puts them in the shop window. And that is a thing that's true. Liverpool have done that so much. They bring players in for a low fee, maybe don't use them much, if at all, then sell them for more money. Or even sell them for more money with add-ons and things, you know.
We've got arguably the best centre-back in the world, or he has had that reputation for several years, and it's hardly disputed. But you've got to look at the lads who've played next to him over the years, like the likes of Joe Mata, Ibu Konate, Joe Gomez, even Dejan Lovren, lads who, when they're not with Virgil van Dijk, are maybe giving you a 7 out of 10, 6 out of 10.
Yeah. But
when they were Virgil van Dijk, they're 8 or 9 out of 10 because he will coach them through a game. And as you say, that surely, you know, there's a one or two down there that you could bring up. And I'm not saying that Phillips doesn't learn from him because he obviously does, and he obviously has. Like he's obviously improved defensively in one way or another by being around top class players on the training facility every day. But if you have the potential opportunities to say to some young kid, right, we're 3 or 4-0 up in the game here, 82 minutes. Get on there for 10 minutes. Go and stand next to Virgil. Just, you know, feel the atmosphere. Like, this is Anfield. Go and, you know, grace the turf because, you know, many, many millions around the world would love the opportunity to do that. And he'll talk you through the next 10 minutes. It might be a complete blur. You don't know what's happening, but Virgil will get you through them regardless, and you will learn so much from doing that. I think it's just something that, you know, it just feels a little bit lost on us. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's been a lost opportunity as well from the Premier League and the FA and so on, because since Brexit, there are a lot of bad things about Brexit. Let's not even go there. But one of the potentially good things about Brexit is it's harder to bring players in. Like, you can't bring some Spanish wonder kid in now quite the way you could because the rules have changed. So you've got to bring players in that are basically from Great Britain, whatever that entails. Maybe even from the UK. I don't know I really don't know the rules, but you maybe can bring a lad in from Northern Ireland and that would be okay. But you probably couldn't bring a lad in from the Republic unless, I'm not quite sure the way the rules work with Ireland. Maybe you could, but you definitely can't bring a young lad in from Spain the way you could. So we've got to bring lads in that are local in the sense of being from this island or something. And that helps the FA find the next future really good England winger, and to be honest, you know, be friends with the Scottish FA. It might help them find the next amazing right back, which maybe we're going to do with young Calvin. But it's an opportunity to sort of find these young players. So maybe the Premier League, when they up the subs and said you can have that number of subs, you can bring that many on, it's just put some stipulation in that maybe 2 of the subs on the bench have got to be under 21s. You know, it's not rocket science. It's not going to hurt anyone. And some of the clubs that were against the increase in the number of substitutions you can have were kind of looking at Liverpool as if Liverpool had all this money and could just find all these amazing players. Well, as we've seen this season, Liverpool's bench has not been full of amazing players. It's been full of potential and things like that, but it's not been full of like top draw players. So yeah, that would have been an opportunity, but never mind. Football loves missing opportunities, doesn't it? But you could say earlier on in the season we kept missing opportunities, but I don't think we did against Wolves. I mean, Wolves, my God, against Southampton. This is it. It's been that sort of a season already. We got 3 goals from 2 strikers, and although we did let one in, as is sort of our sort of trademark these days. I thought it was a good performance from those 2 up front. They they put a shift in. They got the goals. Salah was okay. No, we didn't score, but this is what we want. We as much as we've spent so much time on this podcast just now talking about defence, it's up front that gets you excited, isn't it? And Bobby, has he earned a new contract from that? From what you were saying, is Darwin kind of underlined why we paid so much for him? This is what we want to see. That's why I was so glad we went in to this break with that result.
Are you that person who has everything? The coolest merch and those must-have fan threads? Well, over at our Anfield Index shop, we've gone that extra mile when it comes to pimping up your Liverpool collection. From our popular range of bespoke design t-shirts, sweaters, hoodies and hats, to our signature edition mugs, prints and coasters, all provided with fast worldwide shipping. We have something for every red. We also stock official LFC merchandise and are licensed with the Premier League and UEFA to sell official iron-on shirt badges and sleeve patches. As a listener to this podcast, you can get 10% off everything with coupon code AIPRO10. Just head over to AnfieldIndex.shop or find us on Etsy by searching for Anfield Index.
We'll start with Bobby. I think, sort of your head says maybe, possibly, and your heart probably says, yeah, it's Bobby, give it. And this season, he certainly, he's upped his goal scoring output. I think there's an argument to be said that we've probably overplayed him because we've had to. Again, down to injuries. But he's doing it. He's doing it in the right moments, and he scored a few key goals for us. You think of like the game against Arsenal, and he come off the bench and he scored a wonderful goal, but unfortunately the result didn't go our way. For which I must flag up that Michael Oliver has apologised for Klopp for that, because he made a few wrong decisions. Now, wouldn't it be wonderful if there was a system available that a referee could be told, I think you made a wrong decision there. Go and have a little look at that. Have a second view and see if you want to stick with that decision. And
it could be like an assistant referee, but he's like on video link or something.
Yeah,
like what they could call it. Video. I don't know. Anyway,
that'd be handy, that, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Instead of 4 weeks later, some referee crawling out of a hole and saying, "Sorry about that, Gov, I got it wrong."
And you know what? Would Klopp have had his touchline ban if Oliver had the balls, the decency, the good nature, the manners to apologise in a timely manner? Because I don't see why he couldn't have apologised 2 days later. It won't change the game, but it will change attitudes. And no wonder Klopp was losing his rag with referees when he'd seen something like that, because straight away Klopp's wary of referees because he's seen that in front of him.
Yeah, it's happened a few times, hasn't it? Because wasn't it the referee regarding the City game and stuff like that? Was that Oliver as well who said he got that one wrong, or Anthony Taylor? I can't remember. There's that many of them who get so many things wrong. But yeah, just a flag of note. And maybe in hindsight there would then not be adverse reactions, like you say, from Jurgen Klopp. But bringing it back to Bobby, I think we are the type of club where if we were flush for cash and we could bring in players ad hoc for 40, 50 million, 3 or 4 at a time every summer, 1 or 2 in the winter, then we would probably say, thank you very much, Bobby. You've served us well. However, we've got a couple of young lads lined up for the summer. All the best. But we don't. We operate differently at the current time, under the current ownership, under the current financial operation that we guys by. So giving him, maybe a 2-year deal isn't such a bad thing. He's good around the dressing room because we've got a lot of Latin, South American players. He is a key figure in terms of, uniting them. From what I understand, any of the sort of players who come from that region, or even the likes of Jota, who speaks Portuguese as well, and Carvalho as well. He sort of welcomes them into the family, and they have a little community which, must really help those lads settle. Again, takes us over to Darwin Núñez. He come from Portugal, obviously come from Uruguay via Portugal. New country, new language, young boy, new club, new manager, new tactics. A lot of things thrown at the lad, and he didn't have the ideal start. We don't need to go over it, but every week he impresses me. Every week there's something there that you come away from the game and say, well, his movement was good, his heading's good, his hold-up's getting better, he's winning, scored a few headers, like he's a towering presence in the box, his pace is good, his tracking back's getting better.
He's frightening defenders.
There's so much stuff every week that you tick in the box and say, you know what, this is why we bought him. And the bottom one is goals, they're coming. Yeah. So, we can't really argue. If you're still doubting Darwin Núñez, then you've got an agenda against him personally, because, to write a lad off after half a dozen games, which a lot of people did, and they're slowly crawling under a rock because, he's proven them right. And once again, Klopp's and Liverpool's transfer recruitment policy is proven right. We don't really sign any duds. And those who are maybe labelled as a dud, there's usually a cross next to them because there's a reason why. A la Naby Keita in terms of fitness. That's it. Yeah. His ability isn't doubted, it's his fitness.
Yeah, that's it. And that's one thing that's hard to sort of mitigate against. You can do all kinds of medical checks and so on and so forth, but you can't predict that someone's going to start having bad injuries and things that maybe are totally unconnected. But maybe, maybe you can sort of get to the bottom of things. I know years ago, Steven Gerrard and Michael Owen were both getting a lot of injuries, hamstrings, and they worked out that it was something to do with the back muscles or something. It's such a long time ago. I'm not a medical expert, but basically the medics we had at the time, or the specialist they went to see, looked at this recurring problem and looked at a bigger picture and found out a way to sort of help it. And obviously, I mean, Gerrard played for years as a top quality player for us, and maybe could have played longer. If we'd have been able to let him accept the role of maybe not being a starter every week, maybe, in different circumstances, we'd have kept him a bit longer and he'd have been doing a job for us. And that's what I like about Bobby staying, to be honest, that, as we just said with Milner, an older player is not necessarily useless to you. He's got to be able to score the goals. He's got to be able to put the performances in. He's got to be able to play a role for us that we want him to play. If that means it changes slightly as time goes on. It never did John Barnes any harm changing his role for Liverpool back in the day when, we got a good few more years out of him by him changing his role. I think Bobby's important to us. So depending on the kind of money being spoken about, it would be terrible to see him playing against us next season or something, because we just let his contract run out or let it slip down to a point where we had to accept an offer for him. He's our player. He's our Bobby for me. He's nobody else's. And I'd be delighted if he kind of spent the rest of his days playing for us, and when it was time for him to call it a day, he called it a day with us, and we look back with fondness at what he'd done right from the beginning right to the end. Let's see. Just quickly as well on the bench, back to the bench if you like, and then back to the youngsters. I think as well as Bobby potentially getting a new contract, another one mentioned is a young lad who just signed his first contract, isn't it, Ben Doak?
Yeah, he was 17, I think, back end of last week. So obviously the professional contract is only available for lads who turn 17. As a 16-year-old, it's a different type of contract. But made his debut against Derby was lively, aggressive. I think he was only on the pitch for around about 18, 20 minutes, and he completed more dribbles than anyone else on the night, which kind of shows how poor a game that was, but also shows obviously the talent this kid's got, and he's fearless. And from all accounts, if you have a look at just games played at the underage level, he tends to be on the score sheet quite a regular basis, without having to confess to watching any of the youth football, which I've said. You'd always do probably glance an eye if the under-18s or under-23s are playing. You can't just say, oh, how'd he got on? Oh, he won like 3-2, who scored? And as we said before, there's always a handful of names who are touted as the next big thing. And he is, in that conversation as a potential future star, and getting goals on a regular basis won't do him any harm. And we cherry-picked him from Celtic because Brexit allows us to, because he's technically British.
Yeah.
But he's got something, and hopefully, with the right education, the right developments, that we can have another player on our hands. And he's developed in the right way, and he's at the right place. And if he's a left-footed player who plays on the right-hand side, I think, could be wrong, but if that's the position he came on, there's a fella there called Mo Salah who isn't too bad as a role model to learn from either.
Yeah.
A model pro, some might say. Labels obviously given to those lads who work hard and are industrious, but something that isn't really ever said about Mo Salah. And if you look at him physically, if that's not a model pro, I don't know what is.
Yeah, he's modelling out his attitude as well. I mean, there was that in the Southampton game. That's when I knew there'd been a really bad decision made, because he got so angry. I can't even remember what it was now. It might have even been that we should have had a corner and we got a goal kick. I can't remember what it was, but I just remember thinking at the time, you don't see him lose his rag like that. That must have been a bad decision, because he's an honest player, in the true sense of the word, I think, Mo Salah. But yeah, bringing in players from Celtic and things, I think what we've got there is we're trying to produce players in the academy. If that doesn't work out and we can bring young players in from other academies, then we help those other academies, because money will change hands at some point, whether it's straight away or further down the line. There's rules in place to make sure academies don't lose out financially if a bigger or other club, if you like, comes and brings one of your players off, takes one of your players off you. So there's scope there for Celtic to maybe use some money from Liverpool to find more stars, and maybe we'll go and cherry pick one of those again. But there's something about, as an older fan, I remember when we kind of found all our best players from Scotland, and maybe that's coming back again, and maybe there's some more to be found. Let's hope. We've not done bad in the past with players from Celtic too. Most recently, Van Dijk was a former Celtic player. And there's some lad called Kenny Dalglish who came from Celtic as well, who didn't do too badly for us. So, I have nothing against us bringing players in from Celtic if they're right. We just got to keep doing that scouting at all levels, scouting for the youngsters, scouting for the more established players, scouting for the next big thing, and all of this. This is what we've got to keep doing, keep all that going, and keep building and building and building. He actually, sadly, he actually got injured playing for the under-21s last night by the looks of it. So, the Scotland under-21s, yeah. So he might be, hopefully. This happens, doesn't it? He's probably, by the sounds of it, he had three chances saved by the Iceland keeper. There's probably an order went out to just keep him quiet. Maybe that's what it was. He played the full game actually, but there was a bit of a rough challenge in the second half. So, he's having some treatment, but hopefully that's not too bad. And then another play we mentioned just before we came on, we were talking about is. We've mentioned him before, Curtis Jones. I still feel like some people think the jury's out on him, but the fact is, the reason the jury's out, if it is out, is that there's still a decision to be made about him. He's not maybe not the finished article, but he's not sort of a nobody. He's going to be good at some point, I think, for someone. Whether it's us remains to be seen. So I think in my view, it's worth getting him tied down if you can, because then you dictate where he goes to next, whether that's your first team as an established player or somewhere else for a decent fee.
Yeah, I think already Mays have had a couple of years left on this deal, and if we've done the thing of protecting the assets in terms of what we haven't done with Oxlade-Chamberlain, Naby Keita, and let their contracts get to the point of the last 12 months, and therefore, obviously, with those two lads, and with Curtis Jones, there's been injury issues over the time at Liverpool, but Curtis is obviously a lot younger, and we probably see that as potentially more valuable to us, whether that be saleable assets or whether that be using on the pitch assets. And we've allowed players to walk away in my opinion, far too often for no fees, and that has not aided our ability to spend in the transfer market. But that is for the bigger, longer discussion. I think with Curtis, I think we've said it before, we don't know what he is. Some people might think he's a 10, some people say he's a midfielder, some say he's better from the left, some people think, he can be something else different. And I'm of the opinion that we need to go and send him somewhere for a year, do what Chelsea have done with the likes of Mason Mount, the likes of Conor Gallagher. Go and get this lad 39, 40 games, first team football every week for the whole season, whether that be Championship, whether that be another Premier League outfit, and find out, A, is he good enough to play Premier League football, which we all probably think he is. He's got a lot of ability. And B, what is his best position?
Oh yeah.
And then we will know, is he an asset to sell? Is he an asset to keep? Because I don't think he's ever going to get the opportunity to nail down a dozen starts for Liverpool, unless there's an injury outbreak, which basically means Curtis and two other midfielders. That's all we've got for our free midfield. Free available midfielders for either a 3-man midfield or a 2-man midfield, whoever we want to line up. If that's all we've got, and it's a case of Curtis Jones or some 17-year-old lad in the academy, then I just don't see him getting the opportunity, because he's still learning, he's still developing, and he needs to go and do that somewhere else for me. And that's not a knock on him. It's probably a knock on the club that we've not allowed them to develop in this way, and we've probably held them back 1 or 2 years too many and held on to him. Now, again, that all ties into the conversation of, have you not got the numbers in the squad, so therefore, a la Nat Phillips, you need to keep these people around, just because, depth and numbers and squad quality isn't always there. So I think if he's signed a long deal and it's 4 or 5 years from now, we've potentially got the opportunity, should we have the right numbers of recruitments over the next couple of transfer windows, to give him a chance to go somewhere and learn, because he probably wants to play football more than anyone else, and obviously play for Liverpool. But if someone turns round and says, we will offer you a full season's football, that's too valuable to turn down.
Yeah, it is, and I think it's an investment as well, like investing in his contracts, investing in then getting him out to a club where he can play regular football, and the investment that you get back in that, your return on your investment in that, is that you get a player that's either, as we say, he's good enough for you, you bring him back into the fold and he starts being a regular for you, regular part of your squad, regularly involved in games, or you've actually upped his value in terms of what his resale value is, because people have actually seen what he can do, rather than just little cameos here and there and thinking, this lad's got potential. They've got, no, this lad's good enough for us, and it might not be good enough for Liverpool, but it'd be good enough for someone with the kind of money we would be asking for him at that point. And it gives him a chance for a decent career. And, maybe, as much as he's a Liverpool fan, maybe one day he's going to come back to Anfield, playing for another club and score the winner at Anfield. So it's all part of how football is. But just talking about investment briefly, on the other investment stuff that's going on is, apparently Tom Werner's issued a statement that's come out via the Boston Globe, which I'm pretty sure FSG own anyway, that paper. What he's saying is, we're exploring a sale, but there's no urgency, no time frame for us, and as far as I'm concerned, it's business as usual. And one outcome could be our continued stewardship for quite a while. So that kind of goes along with what we were saying right at the start of the show, that there's nothing really changed. But if the club does change hands, then, worry about it when it happens. For now, we're kind of going to carry on being run as we have been for the last few years. So it sounds to me that there's no, whether that's been put out because there's so much speculation, it's going to start unsettling the club. I don't think it is. I think the timing's good. If there's anyone out there really genuinely interested, seriously with the money, this is a good time to find out and let them get the money on the table. But, and the only other thing I'm going to add on that is that whatever Tom Werner says in public, through the press and all the rest of it, is, there's always a reason for it. Now, whether that's to keep fans calm, or whether that's to let some investor know that if they don't pull the finger out, they're going to lose the sale, that, this is his way of saying, find another $500 million because we're not shifting this amount. Who knows? But to me, from our point of view, we should read it as, things are going to carry on as they are. There's no rush. We're not going to be sold tomorrow. And it's not like a fire sale like it was for Chelsea, because of what was going on in Russia. This is a sale, hopefully, that's going to be handled properly, and they are going to stick to the word of the way they've sort of given hints so far that they're going to sell us to the right people. So let's see. I'm sure as we do more of these shows over the next couple of months that we'll get more and more mentions of the potential sale of the club. Until FSG turn around and say it's sold or we're not selling, it's going to keep going. So I think it's best we don't think too much about it. Talking of clubs and owners and things, I mean, another club that gets our attention quite a bit for its ownership, we've mentioned it before, is Manchester United. And I think that club, the way it's owned, I'm not sure why I can see why the fans are unhappy with the owners because of the amount of money they're taking out, but they're still getting a lot of money put in. But the way the club is, there's just so much discord from top to bottom, inside and out of that club, with ex-players, mocking current players, with ex-managers getting so much leeway when maybe they should have had that steering wheel taken out of their hands much sooner. But listen, it's all good comedy for us when it happens. But you were mentioning it, and there's been an interview this week which has kind of underlined that with Manchester United, with the sort of interview and the aftermath, and sort of underline why Liverpool, in our view at least, and maybe in Ronaldo's view, because that's who we're talking about, why Liverpool is a different club to a lot of others.
Yeah, we've often said we're different in many ways, not just from Manchester United, but from everyone else. Again, not just as people, but as a club, as a fan base. We pride ourselves on being different as Liverpool fans, and whether that's the way we dress, the way we speak, the way we act, the way we support the club. It's a whole variety of ways, but it's a pride thing on being where you're from and who you support. Now, there's a gang across the park who are maybe not proud of who they support, but that's just the situation that their mothers and fathers put them in, sadly, because at one point they were successful, but now they're not. But it's probably similar to Manchester United. They were also successful once, and they probably will be successful again. There's no denying. A club of that size and stature will probably come back around and find a way somewhere towards a pitch. Whether they regain that pitch, we will, yet to be seen. But this Ronaldo interview was grabbing headlines front and back page to reference the newspapers. And good old Piers Morgan, a man who doesn't like to, keep his trap shut. And I've not watched the full interview because A, why would I? And yeah. B, it's them two. Nothing against Ronaldo, nothing against Piers Morgan, but not my cup of tea, fellas. I've got other things to watch and do with my time. But the snippets that you've seen, the sound bites that have come out, Piers Morgan, being the journalistic, egotistical maniac that he is feeding the words to Ronaldo in terms of guided questions, and Ronaldo is taking the bait and running with it. But he threw more people under the bus than Jose. He's obviously itching to get out of that club, out of the city, and he's not asked who he sets on fire. However, he did find a moment of class and said that he didn't expect what he got at Anfield, which was a moment of respect for, obviously, his lost, I think it was his son. I think he had twins. In a moment of time when, people have pointed fingers and often stood and said, well, Liverpool fans disrespect the national anthem, they disrespect the establishment, they boo the national anthem, they've got no time for when the Queen passed away and stuff like that. It wasn't a wholehearted silence, but that's a much deeper rooted conversation, which again we've brought up on several times, and you could go on for days. And if anything, it's probably one for Tony Evans to really delve into. But losing somebody like a family member, there was a tragic case of a poor child being shot in the city not so long ago. Doesn't matter who that child supports, who the family is, where they come from. they will be remembered by Liverpool and Everton fans alike. And it just so happened that we were playing Manchester United and Ronaldo had lost a child. And as a mark of respect, the type of people that we are, we're human. We understand this. Like,
yeah,
we're not the evil Scousers who don't like the Manx all the time. We dislike them 95% of the time. But in times like tragedies such as those of Munich and Hills, which both clubs have gone through, and losing a child like Ronaldo did, we stood and applauded him. Now, I was on the cop of that game. There was a couple of people around me saying, why are you applauding him? And there was a lot of people that shut them down and said, this fella's lost a kid. Doesn't matter who he plays for, doesn't matter who pays his wages, doesn't matter what shirt he's wearing, he's lost a kid. And that just showed the class of the people. And for him to highlight that in an interview, which was obviously premeditated to shoot so many people down, he gets a round of applause from me. And I will probably give him a round of applause again.
Yeah.
Because of the type of person and player he is and whatever. But, it was nice for him to come out and say that. And it's just, maybe it was a swipe at United. I don't know, but it's good that he said it.
It clearly resonated, and he clearly wasn't expecting because of the rivalry between the two clubs, and it does cross lines from time to time. It has done during my lifetime. I've seen it cross lines, and sadly from both sets of fans it can cross lines. But I think on the whole it doesn't, and I think one of the things that stands out from what you've just said as well is that thing that there's 50,000 people in the stadium or whatever it is, whatever the capacity is at that time in history, 45,000 most of the time when I was younger. It's 45,000 people with 45,000 opinions and feelings and all the rest of it. And there's going to be some differences in how people think, but there's a thing about Liverpool fans as a collective, and I think about the city, the people of the city and the surroundings as a collective, that it's this sort of self-policing way of doing things. So people weren't up for the idea, but they got put straight and they thought, okay, well, fair enough. That's what other people want. We'll go with that. And maybe if there was like a big debate being had well before the kickoff and stuff, then, maybe there'd have been a bit of discussion and backwards and forwards. But in the end, the overall thing would be, all right, then, fair enough. And, I can remember when the war on Ukraine had just started, and we were sort of, I can't remember if it was a minute silence that we did at the time, to sort of show solidarity to Ukraine. And I was on the cop for that game, and I can just remember someone saying, what about Palestine? And I'm thinking, well, yeah, that's another issue that needs to be brought up, but let's deal with the one in front of us now. And there was definitely a big show of solidarity for Ukraine from fans, not just from our club, to be fair, but from everyone. But again, it's another example of that sort of self-policing. And this is what I think makes us different. And we had a moment where we saw someone, a human being, had gone through hell. There's no other way to describe it. That's one of the most, as a dad myself, that's one of the most horrific things I can think it could happen, is to lose a child in any circumstances. It must be horrific. I can't even begin to think how bad it is. I can only try and imagine, and it must be horrific. And yet, dads and mums from other clubs come to Anfield week after week and slag off the people who lost their children at Hillsborough. And that's why, we keep mentioning that, but that's the difference. And, whoever we support and whyever we support them, we're all human beings. And that it pisses me off that football fans far too often forget that, and they get stuck in this world that, and let's face it, people like Piers Morgan are the kind of people who sort of amplify it a lot of the time. This world of toxicity and everything's black and white and good and bad and evil versus angelic acts and all the rest of it. It winds me up, but never mind. But in a way, sort of changing the subject a little bit, it's a bit like that with Everton as well, because everything to them, it's either cop-out behaviour or it's their behaviour. It's either good or it's bad. And it's so funny watching them implode, because just quickly on that Southampton game, I said they'll be wanting us to lose that game, even though it helps them. But we won it and helped them, didn't we? Because they're just outside the relegation zone going into this enforced break. They're like in the spot that's just outside the relegation places. They're 1 point from safety, basically. 1 point in the safety positions, if you like. So, anything interesting happened with Everton this week?
I don't need a VPN. I've got nothing to hide. This is what I used to tell myself before I hooked up with LibertyShield.com. Not only is my home internet now fully encrypted, but I can now access all the websites I want, whenever I want, and do so from absolutely anywhere. As a Liverpool fan, I love to know I can now watch every match, regardless of whether it's on UK TV or not. My Liberty Shield VPN makes sure nothing is blocked and guarantees me super fast streaming speed throughout that match. You can get connected right now with their software package, which includes a 48-hour no-obligation free trial and instant access to their apps for Apple, Android, Fire TV, PC, Mac, and Android TV. Or go a step further like I have and get one of their pre-configured VPN routers. These small but powerful devices allow you to easily connect every device in your home to VPN, making it the perfect solution for smart TVs, Mag boxes, and games consoles. Visit LibertyShield.com today and use coupon code AIVPN25 to get 25% off at checkout.
They went down. Oh, down under, sorry. They're in Sydney. They might go down, though. And I did think we said last week the natives are getting restless. Again, reference to, maybe native Australia while they're down there. Maybe, they can boomerang the way back. I'm out of cheap ones now. But I think, it's always good to have a little side glance at them and see how bad they're doing. And, Frank's record, I think he's been there almost a year now, is worse than Rafa's. His start is worse than Rafa's. And I couldn't yet to see any bed sheets plastered on fences, forcing Frank out because he gets them. But as things go on and on and on, like they are, they all are starting to get a bit restless. They're all finally seeing Anthony Gordon for what he really is. Who's a lad who spends more time face down on the turf than running across the turf.
Yeah, like you see, like when Napoli came over, and they were like doing that quite a bit. You sort of expect it, but it just doesn't look right in this country, does it? Like especially,
they're an odd bunch, the Everton fans, and I think they're clinging to the fact that they've got this shiny new stadium being built on the dock, which does look impressive, but you can't polish a turd. You can have a lovely stadium, go back 15, 20 years, the likes of, big new stadiums at the time, likes of Sunderland and Middlesbrough.
I was just thinking Sunderland, yeah.
You can have this impressive stadium, but if the team that are playing there are no good, it's going to be a graveyard. It's going to be empty. And they couldn't need as much as they say they do. They don't feel good at some park as it is because they're that turgid and they can't watch them. So what are they going to do when they get this new brand spanking new one? I think what the lads in work who we speak to on a regular basis, who are on the whole, because you catch them on their own, they're level-headed Evertonians who will, give you the honest truth in what they're thinking, and they were looking forward to this break more than we were because we started to turn a corner, as we said earlier on. Things are starting to look in the right direction, but they're worried. Individually, when you get them alone, they're worried. When you get them together, they turn into this weird sort of fetish fan base that I think, cop out to the worst thing since sliced bread. And they're odd, but they're starting to realise what I think everyone else knew, which is he's not good enough.
Yeah, and if he's not good enough for the club that he's so well linked to, he was given a chance at Chelsea and didn't last that long at all, considering that there was like a sort of loyalty towards him, if you like, that, fans would have given him so much more time, the way that, I don't want anyone to start thinking I want Steven Gerrard to be Liverpool manager. I think he's got a long time to go yet before you even start thinking about that. But if Steven Gerrard was given the job as Liverpool manager, he'd get a lot more leeway off the fans than many other managers would, because he's Steven Gerrard, and Lampard had that down at Chelsea and it wasn't enough. And maybe Everton felt that maybe he was mistreated because Chelsea's such a sort of trigger happy club with managers, but the scene is not, and they've got an issue now because they had a manager that spent a load of money and then left, and they had a manager who didn't get any money and didn't do very well, but better than the current guy. So they gave the current guy a load of money that's been spent, and now he's not doing very well. And yeah, Stadium of Light, the thing that always jumps out about that stadium to me is how faded the seats look, because if you ever do watch a game, it's so empty, and the fans, I know, and fair play. I mean, it's not just down to a lack of support from the club not doing well. It's financial reasons as well. I know a lot of people just can't afford to go to the game anymore, and we're quite fortunate, those of us who can go to a game. So I'm not, I don't want to sort of downplay that. But even so, one of the sad things about the Stadium of Light is how faded it is in terms of the seats looking like they're all washed out, the colour's gone in them. And that's what Everton are facing if they're not careful. I mean, the stadium in Bolton that used to be called the Reebok Stadium, that was all well and good in its day, but, what kind of football's that had? It's not been having Premier League football in it like it used to. Wigan Athletic, another club that had a stadium, not as grand as Everton Stadium, but even so, you don't see that in the Premier League anymore. And this is the thing. There's loads of clubs we can talk about, even clubs that you've watched Liverpool play in the last 10, 15 years, or I've watched Liverpool play last 10, 15 years. So many clubs who aren't going to be in the Premier League for a while, they're not in there. Once you drop out of it, you don't come back. And I don't know, Everton fans seemed to love it last season when they were in the relegation battle. They got all excited for something, and I'm sure there was a massive sense of joy when they saved themselves from relegation, but, they're kind of almost getting what they wish for, because I'm sure some of them would kind of think, can we do this every year? Well, yeah, you can, but you might not escape it every year.
Yeah, it happened, like, Burnley, probably the most recent and prime example. Like, if, you Burnley were very shrewd with money and didn't invest nowhere near as much as Everton. If we'd have had Everton's investments over the last 5-6 years, God knows what we'd have won, because we have been tight compared to what Everton have spent, and now they've spent it poorly.
Yeah.
But, it's not for the lack of, wanting or trying. But if you had to face a situation which Rafa Benitez went into, where it was, we can't give you much money because we've recklessly spent over the last few years, it's going to come around again in the next year or two. And again, bringing it to Burnley, who were very shrewd operators in terms of the way they balance their accounting sheet. But if you're not willing to invest, or you can't, however you want to dress it up, eventually, if you flirt with the trapdoor enough, it'll open it up and you will get caught and you will go down. And looking at the Championship now, Burnley are doing well, but it only takes 3 bad results and you are probably 14th in that league, or 3 good results and you go from 14th to 2nd. It's an absolute mental league, and I wouldn't want to be down there, because I don't know if your heart rate could take it. Like, sometimes you just think, can we just be stable and just stay around 4th or 5th position, rather than flirt up and down the league? But if Everton do continue this sort of weird obsession with, we'll live off passion and, we'll parade dogs down the street and we'll get the blue flares out and whatever, you eventually will go down, because not every year will there be 3 teams worse than you. And, your point being, we've done them a favour by beating Southampton. But from being at the game last week, Southampton were okay, but it's fairly evident where their problems lie. Much as it is with other teams down the bottom end of the league. But the likes of Nottingham Forest, who are below them, have started to pick up a few points, a couple of wins. Obviously, notably, they beat us. And this break for teams down that end of the league is obviously going to give them an opportunity, like Forest, who've got basically a whole new squad in there, a chance to, maybe bet a few things in and probably improve. And then Wolves have got a new manager down there. What are they going to bring in the second half of the season? There's all these questions, and I just don't know where Everton go from here. Did he change manager, because that's clearly not working for them in recent times? And Southampton have got a new fella coming in, as we said. West Ham probably will not be as bad as what they currently have been, and maybe this year is 1 year too many in terms of the European distraction.
Yeah.
And then just looking above them, Leicester have pulled themselves right out of the mire, in where we probably all thought Brendan Rodgers was out the door, but they've stuck with him and he started to pull things around. Villa have changed manager, a couple of wins, climbed up the table. Bournemouth, I would imagine either they give Gary O'Neill the job he was doing okay, or they've waited to this World Cup opportunity to find someone they wanted and get them in and give them 5-6 weeks like a pre-season to bed in and improve. And then there's Leeds, who, you know, are absolutely crazy. They beat us, but
yeah,
they can easily go and get tanked. And just when you look there, you think, well, is there really 3 worst teams in Everton? And I don't think there is. Like, they're going to be in trouble. And once we get to March, April, May time, and if they are still down there, they're laughing and joking, and then, you know, start to be in, because, you know, there's people who you love, there's friends, family who are Evertonians, and it, in a sadistic way, it's kind of funny just to laugh and mock at them, because for years and years they've always said, we won't go down, we're too good, and the cocky arroganceness of them, and they'll always try and knock us down a peg, even though we've been much more successful. But if they actually do go down, God knows what'll happen. Like we've said it before, last year they probably will self-implode, and, you know, you fear for them.
Yeah, I mean, we I don't know. I remember last year we were saying, like, do we want them to go down? Do we not? And we kind of all said, well, we'd missed the derby, and then you think about your mate who would be genuinely devastated by it, that kind of thing, and, you know, the decent fan that you get on his own who's all right. But then, like you say, when they're all together as a group, you know, they would have deserved to have gone down the way they've been the last few years, and sacrificing a dog isn't probably going to help them this time. They're going to have to think of something better than that to get to survive it, unless they change. And there'll be a lot of fun on the way. I think they've just, it's a shame they can't go back. They blame so much on what happened at Heysel, really, on their whole downfall, that they've believed that for so long that they've failed to see what any real problems are, and they just basically blamed Liverpool for everything for like decades now. And, you know, leave them to it. I mean, I'm saying all this in a kind of, I know we're sort of having a laugh about them, but there's a big part of me who wants them to kind of recognise it and sort of slap themselves round the face and sort of snap out of it, if you like, and sort of wake up and see what's really been going on for all these years. But you know what? Carry on making us have a laugh, because it's good. It's good. It's good to have a laugh, and that's what football is. It should be something to laugh at. I think we've done everything. We said plenty this week, haven't we, about Liverpool, and football's on a break now, as far as I'm concerned, because there's some other thing going on that isn't proper football. But I'm sure I will be sort of drawn to the TV at some point over the next few weeks and keep an eye on things. But, you know, football shouldn't be getting played at this time of year and shouldn't be getting played where it's getting played. But it is. Can't do anything about it. So, in the meantime, we'll keep some content coming for you, and maybe not be too World Cup heavy on it, because I bet you, like, if you like us, you'd be glad to just get a break from the World Cup, because it's going to be on the front and back of every paper. You're going to never hear the end of it for the next month or so. And if it's good, great. But if it's not, you need somewhere else to think about, don't you? So we'll do that. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening, as always. Thanks to Jay. And we will be back soon. So enjoy the World Cup if you're watching it. Enjoy whatever you do instead if you're not. Just find some other distraction until football's back to do it for you. But for now, that's it from us, and we'll see you soon.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index, and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.